morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to another HRO Today Educational Podcast. I'm Elliot Clark, the CEO of HRO Today. We publish HRO Today Magazine, HRO Today EMEA, and HRO Today APAC. We're the producers of the HRO Today forums and the HRO Today educational conferences held around the world, and the managers of the HRO Today Association. Today, we're going to talk about trends. Albert Einstein famously said the only universal constant is change, or something to that effect. Talent acquisition, talent retention, and talent in general is always undergoing change. As we open 2025, what are the trends you need to follow? What do you need to prepare for? What do you need to anticipate in your planning? Fortunately, for many years, Korn Ferry International has published its Talent Trends Annual Report to give you just that insight. We've had Korn Ferry talk in prior years about some of the interesting findings in their Talent Trends Report, and there's one in this year's that we found very compelling. And the Korn Ferry 2025 Talent Trends Report is linked in the description for this podcast. As you all know, Korn Ferry is one of the world's top providers of RPO, executive search, HR consultancy, and engagement and retention products. Korn Ferry is also one of the most highly rated providers on the HR Today RPO Baker's Dozen and has been for years. Here to cover one of the more interesting trends is Richard Shea, Global Managing Director Projects from Korn Ferry. So a bit about Richard. Richard has been with Korn Ferry for more than 16 years, starting in their exec search practice before assuming a number of global roles. For the past 3 years, he's run the global projects practice, managing customized talent acquisition solutions in tight timeframes for global clients and consulting on talent-related topics in a variety of areas. Richard, welcome to the podcast. And is there anything you'd like to add, about Korn Ferry or the particular service offering for our audience?
Thank you, Elliot. So, as you eloquently put, Korn Ferry is a global organizational consulting firm. So it combines both strategy and talent services. And part of those services are around our RPO, or recruitment process outsourcing division. Within that, our projects business, which I lead, really focuses on clients that are going through changes, either being a technical revolution, expanding into new markets, mergers or acquisitions, or launching of new products. And our projects business can support organizations going through that sort of change. So excited to be here today.
Excellent. Well, we're going to ask you to explain a lot of stuff. So let's start off with this. One of the trends identified in the report was very interesting to me, and it relates to the intersection between an organization's learning and development programs. A lot of times we think of HR in silos. L&D is different than talent acquisition. But you guys identify this trend that there's an intersection between an organization's learning and development programs and its talent acquisition success or failure. So what did your research find about that connection? And what should HR departments do to make sure that their L&D and their TA functions are mutually supportive, Richard?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think our TA Trends report, within that is a workforce survey. Within that workforce survey, we surveyed 10,000 professionals across all career stages, be that from entry level to CEO. I'm in 6 markets, which were across the USA, UK, Brazil, the Middle East, Australia, and India. And the results provide a global snapshot of workforce sentiment across the globe. And what was really interesting in that is that we found that 67% of employees would stick with a company if they were offered upskilling and advancement opportunities, even if they weren't that happy with their current role. Now, conversely, a lack of career growth is the second biggest reason people said that they would leave their role. So people want to join companies that invest in their future. Now, to attract early career talent, 61% of respondents will offer internships and apprenticeships, whereas 32% will provide entry-level training programs, and 24% will plan to partner with high schools for early career development programs. So it's key that L&D and the TA functions are mutually supported moving forward. And I think some key ways L&D and TA should be working together are in areas like promoting L&D programs and career growth opportunities in job postings, in interviews, and other points of the hiring process to really marriage the two together. Another part is understanding the growth and other business goals and what they are and what skills you need to achieve them. So how does the L&D strategy within that firm support this? Collaboration to create effective skills assessments, using and utilizing feedback to refine that hiring and then therefore your development strategies. And finally, how their onboarding process provides new hires with the tools and information they need to really help with their learning and development pathways. So I think those were some of the core findings that we had from our recent trends report, Elliot.
Do you think that, by and large, when you're talking to TA leaders and the Korn Ferry clients, are they thinking, they're thinking about employment brand, but are they sitting down with the L&D side to really, talk about, well, these are programs that we find popular with potential candidates, or how do we more aggressively market our L&D programs? Is that sort of top of mind in TA? And if it isn't, should it be?
I think for the more mature organizations that have moved down that L&D pathway, that is at top of mind. And they are really combining the way that they lead their L&D strategy and the way they combine that with their TA strategy. I think for some of the less mature organizations out there, they appreciate that. I think it's predominantly probably more lip service than in actually combining the two together. But certainly, I think organizations are really starting to understand that their learning and development strategy can really help in their TA organization around attraction and obviously then the development. And of course, the core part is retaining of good talent.
Well, and of course, that is, if the employees are telling us that career opportunities for growth and development are a significant factor in their choice, the market's never wrong. So having the data that you just laid out is critically important, and we need to honor that and make sure that you have those programs, because that's how you retain people. Let's explore this further, the changing nature of how candidates view their career growth opportunities and the choices that they'll make. What are you seeing as best practices about how companies can make their L&D offerings and their culture connect well to that employment brand, and make sure that candidates looking at the organization understand that employee value proposition? What should they be doing right now, let's say during this relatively low level of hiring, to ensure that this is a strategic advantage when hiring picks up in the coming months or years?
Sure. So I think, organizations appreciate that the strong L&D program really enhances an organization's EVP. I think in previous years, we've seen employers promoted their EVP during recruitment, but new hires soon found out that this was not necessarily accurate or a good reflection of the organization. So sort of news of this spread via word of mouth, social media. We've all seen online reviews and news reports highlighting companies that probably didn't follow through on some of their promises. The candidate marketplace today and candidates on the whole have become more savvy. They carry out research on companies. They ask more questions during the recruitment process to see if they really walk the talk. So it's important that a company's EVP is authentic and truly reflects a culture and hence the learning and development offering provided. I think a strong L&D program enhances an organization's EVP and vice versa. So making it more attractive to potential candidates is really important to be ready for when that hiring picks up, as you've mentioned. And I think companies can do a couple of things. The first is that companies need to build a culture that puts learning first. So an example of that is fill roles internally to promote that continuous development instead of going externally. Setting up reverse mentorships. And we're seeing that happen a lot in some of the more progressive organizations that we work with. Really, those mentorships and the reverse mentorships are really working. And offering personalized training that matches the individual's professional goals with and combining with the business growth. So I think that's one area where a strong L&D program can really enhance that. The second is really it's no longer enough to provide additional L&D benefits like standardized training, in-person workshops and online courses. Employees can use this time now to start really experimenting with new approaches such as virtual reality, gamification of their hiring and learning and development processes. And of course, the AI-enabled coaching. So I think there's a range of things that employees can do to truly understand the different audiences and their needs. And this can create detailed profiles for each talent group, for instance, such as by location, generation, interests or identity, and then really tailor that EVP, including the L&D offerings, to each group to improve recruiting efforts. So it's much more targeted and focused, Elliot, I think.
Part of what I'm hearing from you is that, as organizations review their entire HR offering, they really need to think about the candidate's perception as being on a continuum that extends well past the moment of hire. Okay, and we talk about years ago, when people denied the linkage between your hiring process and your long-term engagement and retention with the organizations. But clearly your research is showing there is a great deal of linkage between those two things, at least in the mind of the modern candidate. Richard, I think that everyone should read this aspect of the Korn Ferry report. There are actually a number of other trends that are highlighted in it. But in terms of best practices, can you give me an example of one of your clients, and you don't have to name them if you don't want to, where you think they've done a stellar job, and what do you see as having really distinguished their program, sort of made it best of class?
Obviously, I won't mention the client, but they're within the technology space. And what this client really did, and what our TA Trends report found, is really they married up their learning and development EVP and driving ed TA strategy. So that all led to the retention of core talent. Even within the reduced market scopes we found ourselves in the last couple of years, within certain markets such as life sciences and technology, the demand and the need for core talent has not gone away. So what this client did is really looked at how it attracted its talent and then personalized their L&D for those individuals within those roles to really be able to drive from entry-level training programs up to senior programs, to really develop those programs from a personalized perspective. And interestingly enough, looking at the results, they found that the retention was at least 60% higher for those individuals where they had a personalized L&D program compared with just a standard L&D pathway, which a lot of organizations have, and very little investment in there. So I think certainly we've seen those organizations that have invested in really personalizing their L&D really helps drive the retention of core talent, but also the attraction, because again, going back to our previous point, people talk, candidates talk. It's all online these days, and organizations are tying that up with their EVP to really drive that message forward, Elliot.
Well, all great advice. We're pretty much at time, but Richard, excellent points, and I've long been a believer that candidates, it's a bit like a stream of consciousness. The way they lead their work lives. So these things are all connected, and their experience is a single part of their life. So, it's great to see data that actually supports the need for HR to think of itself as a holistic experience for the candidates. So I want to thank Richard Shea, who is the Global Managing Director for Projects from Korn Ferry's RPO division.
Thank you, Elliot. It's been my pleasure.
Richard, thanks for taking part in the podcast. We'll have you back to talk some more about what you're finding about the linkage between good talent acquisition and good retention practices. This is Elliot Clark. Thank you for attending this HR Today Educational Podcast, and we'll look forward to having you join us on a future educational podcast. Thank you.